Good morning, people of Messiah. Uh, it's good to see you, sort of. Uh, Sorry I can't be with you this morning, but after a lovely month down in Florida, we came home to snow and we brought COVID with us. So I'm home, but thinking of you this morning and glad to be able to share the good news, at least electronically. So I'd invite you to begin by asking the question, what happened to Peter that day along the Sea of Galilee? What happened that his life took such a totally new direction and he began to live as he had never lived before? And of course, so what? Could it possibly be that something that happened so long ago has anything to do with you or me, or with the fact that it's Messiah's Commitment Sunday, or new leaders will be installed for the congregation? So I would invite you this morning to listen in as we imagine Peter reflecting on that decisive day in his life, as he sat in a Roman prison, knowing clearly that his life would soon be ended by the authorities. And I can imagine the fellow prisoners sitting around, their fates as certain as Peter's, wondering how in the world a guy who might recant his preaching, who might offer a loyalty oath to Caesar, who could potentially avoid his death, might instead double down, insisting that this Jesus person crucified, discredited, a rabbi from far off Palestine, was actually the living Son of God. What caused Peter to cast his lot so completely with this Jesus character, and apparently to be content with the fate that would await him? So, Peter, I can't explain to you with much precision what happened to me that day. I can tell you how it unfolded. Maybe that'll help a little bit. James, John, and I, we were finishing our work. We were ready to head home for some breakfast and a nap. That was our usual. We'd been fishing all night long. We had nothing to show for it. Frustrating, but not uncommon. Fortunately, the day before we had enough fish to hold us over for a day or two. The three of us were kind of all in the same boat. We were, if you will, ready to take over our father's businesses, the boats, the equipment, the nets. It wasn't much, but it was something. Our families had managed modest livings. We probably were going to do the same, although as young men we had dreams, ideas of much more, but we were living in occupied territory, and certainly under the Romans there wasn't going to be much more than what we were already experiencing. There weren't going to be fleets and crews and a thriving fish market that we ran ourselves. So we were pretty much clear that our lives were going to be ordinary, common. So much so that I never imagined we'd get much beyond Capernaum. And here I am in Rome. Who knew? Well, that day, we were finishing our work. Along the shore comes a crowd of people, maybe 100, 200 people. I knew, I just guessed immediately they were following this new rabbi who'd come out of Nazareth. His name was Jesus. I'd heard about him. I had not encountered him. He was popular, getting to be pretty big news in our little rural area, though, again, I'd never seen him. I'd never paid much attention. Truth be told, wasn't real big into religion. I went to the local synagogue on festivals with my family. I remember being there, but not real interested. And I assumed this Jesus guy was probably going to find his fame short-lived, local. The Roman authorities were not good at allowing people to gather fans or companies. So, and besides that, trendy religious people kind of come and went fast. So we're getting our equipment together, stowing it in the boat, and this rabbi walks by and asks if we might let him take our boat out, my boat out, in order to preach to the crowd more easily. It wasn't much room on the rocky shore. Well, that was a little bit annoying because he asked me right in front of all these people, how was I going to say no? I wasn't going to let him take my boat out by himself, so I consented. He got in the boat. I pushed off a couple of dozen yards. I continued to do my work, storing the equipment and taking care of everything, and wasn't wasn't paying much attention. I know I must have scowled at him. I let out a pretty deep sigh. So he finished his preaching, told the folks to go home, and he said to me, he looked at me, he said, "Simon, why don't you put out a little farther and put the nets down?" Well, first of all, I don't know how he knew my name. But second of all, if the rumors were true, this guy had just come out of the carpentry business. He was preaching. He's going to tell me how to do my work. I'm a fisherman. No, he said, put out a little farther, put the nets out again. Uh, Again, annoyed. I wanted to go home, but I thought if I didn't do what this guy asked me, he might not leave me alone. So I said, fine, frustrated though I was. So out went the nets. It's no easy task, I have to add. And then with plenty of exasperation demonstrated, I began to pull them in. They were full. The nets were full. They were full to overflowing, and I knew if I pulled in all those fish on the nets, it would swamp the boat. I wasn't thinking about anything else that was happening, but I knew we had to keep those fish, so I yelled to James and John to come out to help. They did, and for the next 10 or 15 minutes, we worked at getting those nets in, all those fish in our boats. It had not occurred to me what had just happened. I was finished. I was standing there in the boat, panting, and I looked at Jesus, and he was just sitting in the stern of the boat, smiling. And as sudden as a lightning bolt, I found myself completely overwhelmed, utterly, thoroughly, absolutely overwhelmed. I had trouble breathing. My head was swimming. Without a hint of warning, not an instant of forethought, I just knew I was in the presence of something or someone I had never been before. I instantly flashed my childhood days, the recollections of being in the synagogue and hearing the prophet Isaiah read, that time when this bizarre creature in the temple approached Isaiah and touched his tongue with a burning coal, and it completely undid Isaiah. Woe is me, is what he said. And that's what was going on with me. Woe is me. I didn't know what to do or say. I didn't know how to act. I knew in the very depths of my soul that I wasn't fit to be in the presence of this person, in the presence of this man, this extraordinary life. Something enormous, something life-changing was happening here right in front of me. I sat hard down on the bench facing Jesus. He waited while my breathing returned to normal. His eyes were fixed on me. They were insistent but gentle. Then he said to me, "Simon, don't be afraid of what's just happened or who I am. Don't be afraid. From now on, you're going to be doing a different kind of fishing. You are going to be inviting people to new life, just like you've been invited." Well, you know the rest of the story. The boat, the equipment, the plans for fishing, out the window. Along with James and John, We chucked all that and we went with Jesus, though we had no idea whatsoever where it was all going to lead, how it was going to all turn out. And I've reflected on that day every single day for the rest of my life. Ever since it happened, I never understood life the same way again. Once I grasped this truth that I had been in the presence of God, because that's who Jesus was. Nothing was ever the same. Life, my life, your life, the life of the whole world, the life of all of creation, the earth, even the fish. All of life became infused with value and meaning and wonder. That day I experienced awe. I was captured by the truth that God loved this whole world, all that was in it, and he loved it enough to come to be part of it. And he loved me fully, thoroughly, entirely. Jesus came to be in my boat to let me know that God wants full, abundant, extravagant life for this whole creation. Had I known that before, I might have appreciated the sunrise in the morning over the eastern hills as I hauled in the nets. I might have wondered at the fish in the lake around me. I might have been more considerate of the fishmongers in the market. They weren't trying to cheat me, only managing for themselves and their families. I might have valued my Father's work and his faithfulness to us much more. I might have been more appreciative of all of life sooner, had I met Jesus sooner. And after I knew for a certainty that God's love and God's presence were all around me, I began to see it everywhere, all around, in everyone, strangers, Gentiles. God's goodness, it's intended for everybody. God's love is real and present for all, even if they're unaware of that. That's what I discovered that day. My life exploded open. A young, discontented fisherman, reluctant to cooperate with a traveling preacher, discovered God. As you know from your scriptures, this happened to others. A young ambitious rabbi named Paul discovered God in a life-changing way. Countless followers of Jesus all through the ages would find themselves willing to give up everything, even life itself, for the sake of new life. Well, I hope as I tell you my story today, perhaps you'll be more willing to open your eyes, your minds, your hearts to the life that God demonstrated in Jesus. Anyone who is aware that this all-pervasive love of God and Jesus Christ is for them also begins to become aware that it is for all the world, every neighbor, every family, every nation. God wants nothing more than to capture you, to open your life to newness, to hope, to generosity, to service, to faithful living, whether you are fishing for a living or caring for your grandkids or helping your neighbor or selling widgets or nursing the ill in trucks. God wants you to be fully, completely alive. Well, what do you think, dear ones of Messiah? Hear the message of God's love for you and for all? Do you hear it clearly enough that you might be moved to a deeper appreciation of your neighbor? To a broader willingness to love those who are different? Maybe to a deeper generosity with the gifts that you've been given to manage and steward and to share. Maybe to a greater sense of call to serve, perhaps here at Messiah or somewhere else in the community of faith. You see, it is God's love. Only God's love, rather than any should desire to be recognized. It is God's love that has the power to move us to new life. God's love, that is the bottom line. And of all of our living, our giving, in all of our serving, in all of life,